My deceased husband and his many secrets. My husband was by all accounts in 2020 healthy. He had a cardiac situation that required surgery in August of that year. Complete surprise. He called me at work. He was driving. He said he thought he was having a stroke. He said he had chest pain. I told him it was a heart attack. I asked him to pull over and dial 911. I met him in a parking lot. I called 911. He still hadn't done this. EMT came, hooked him up, and promptly told me it wasn't a heart attack, but that he was being taken to hospital. Before EMT arrived, he had his phone. I asked him if the code was to open it. He said yes. Then he looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry." I honestly didn't think anything of this because I was panic-stricken. We had been together for 10 years. It was a second marriage for both of us. I loved this man with all my heart. He appeared to be treating me well, very well. 9 days later, he was removed from life support. He had incurred several strokes on the operating table. I was devastated. He was 55 and I was nearly 57. His mother and sister came from across the country while he was in hospital. They stayed with me for 3 weeks. One night a few days after he passed, I found a box of old phones. Many phones. He had kept them all. I went through them looking for old texts, etc. At first it was wonderful. Then for reasons I can't explain, I went into his call log on one of the phones. There was a number there that has been calling him every morning on the way to work, and he had been calling / they were calling every night on the way home. Every workday. Without thinking, I called the number from my phone, but it was disconnected. The name, Heather, popped up on my phone when I called it, and on his phone it said, HXXXXX. I went into his Gmail account. I had never done this before. He left it signed in on his laptop, which had the same code to open it as his phone. I searched for this name and I found several email messages he had sent to himself with attachments. He had been having an affair with this woman for 2.5 years. At some point she had told him she was pregnant. She was 30 and again he was 55 when he died. I sat there stunned. I searched through the other phones and found 299 screenshots of BBM conversations in the photo gallery. That number is not an exaggeration, there were 299. They were having sex frequently during the day. He was never out at night. He was leaving work early driving to her and they were having sex. He was taking her shopping, out to lunch, etc. She was kind enough to include photos of her at her workplace and I had her name, so I called her there. She sat in stunned silence as I told her who I was and asked her if there was a baby. She blurted out, "No." Months go by. I am obsessed with this girl. It is affecting my mental health. His daughter came by one night. I recalled a story he had told me and she said, "No, that's not right. Mom told me XXXXX." Something didn't sit right with me, so I reached out to his ex-wife to whom he had been married for 26 years. We had never met before. He made her out to be a horrible person. She sat and held my hand in the car when we met, and she cried when I told her my story. He had cheated on her as well. The worst part was everything he had told me about his life was a lie. Everything. He created a fake person, someone he thought I would like, and he lived as that person. He kept me apart from his ex-wife because she could expose him. A year later I found an appointment card for a therapist he had been seeing. I knew he was in therapy, but he told me it was for PTSD. It wasn't. The person he was seeing was a therapist specializing in sex addiction and affairs. To make a long story short, I ended up calling this person, telling him my husband had passed and talking to him. He told me my husband had been having sex with men since he was in his early 20s. He told me he knew about the girlfriend and that she had been pregnant, but that my husband rarely talked about her. He said he knew my husband was lying much of the time. I got STD tested. A full panel of testing. I was devastated. On the day I got the negative tests, I drove home sobbing and screaming at him in the car. Then I found the recordings. He had been recording all of his telephone conversations with everyone for years, and they were on his laptop. The 30-year-old? I had every discussion they had ever had. He even recorded their meetings in person. I reached out to her husband because I wanted him to be aware, and I found out they had been separated since 2018. I sent him everything I had, recordings and screenshots. He thanked me. We are still friends today. He is still single and so am I. This journey has been devastating but eye-opening. I've learned a lot about narcissistic personality disorder since I found all of this, and that has been helpful. His therapist told me he didn't love himself and he couldn't love anyone else. I believe this. Thanks for reading this ridiculously long story. I'm interested in sharing and commenting here.